Hi, everyone. This is Jason Barrack of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. We last had him on in 2014, I think in the summer. He is a JD. He is a lawyer. He also has an accounting degree. He's the author of The Great Credit Contraction. He runs the websites Run to Gold and How to Vanish. He's a Bitcoin entrepreneur and also a Bitcoin investor. Thank you for joining us again, Trace Meyer.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, Trace, I want to get your opinion on the Bitcoin industry now. There's been a lot of interesting current events in the last year or so about the Bitcoin industry while the price is, consolidating. We've seen a conclusion to the Silk Road saga with Dread Pirate Roberts and the conviction of Ross Ulbricht. But what role going forward do you think governments are going to play in Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency universe?
Yeah, I think that governments, they're going to play the role that they play in a lot of our other aspects of the economy. When we're dealing with issues of fraud, particularly securities fraud, or we're dealing with things that they've deemed people shouldn't be engaged in, like illegal drugs or things of that nature, or even totally like morally legitimate things, but that they've just prohibited. For example, the FDA, over hundreds of thousands of people are dying because there are shortages of pharmaceuticals, and the shortages are there solely because of the FDA. And so if somebody were to create a website where they sold pharmaceuticals that saved people's lives, but were illegal, then yeah, the government would be attacking those people also, just like the government down in Venezuela is doing. People can't get life-saving medical care and substances for their children, and so they have to turn to the gray markets in order to get that, but that's illegal. And, so governments are going to continue to be, trying to enforce and project their power to keep perceived legitimacy in their systems and things of that nature. But, going forward, I think we're going to see more of that because the governments are all bankrupt. And, so they have to just war is the health of the state. They have to continue waging this war on their individual citizens. So it is unfortunate. And on a tangent to that, I was actually in the courtroom observing the Ross Ulbricht Dread Pirate Roberts trial. So it was very interesting to watch, and to be honest, there was just a torrential rainstorm of evidence not in favor of Ross Ulbricht. So, if you think that you can just go and do things that are completely flagrant, completely against the law that they've set up, and that they're not going to come and find you and throw you in a cage, you're sadly mistaken. And I think he's a good example of that. So they accomplished exactly what they wanted to accomplish out of it.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed about the libertarian community, Trace, and I'm sure you notice this too, is that there doesn't seem to be much middle ground with respect to Bitcoin. Libertarians either seem to love it or hate it, and there's not much in between. I've heard a lot of libertarians, and this conspiracy theory is very common, that the CIA created Bitcoin. I've heard that one a lot, and then I've also heard many libertarians mention that it's easier to track Bitcoin. I've heard that mentioned a lot. And then I've also heard that governments are going to kill Bitcoin. I've heard a lot of libertarians mention that as well. So what are your thoughts on what these conspiracy theories or ideas bring to the health of the industry?
Well, first, I don't think any particular government's going to kill Bitcoin or even attempt to kill Bitcoin. It's not even a speck on an elephant's butt right now in terms of the total size of the capital markets. And it's an innovative new technology. So I think they're going to be looking at it, trying to learn from it, see how it applies. They have nothing to fear from it right now because it's so small. As far as, your other questions, conspiracy theories, they're great, because there's no way to, disprove a negative. Could it have been the NSA? Could it have been the CIA? It could have been. Was it? Probably not very likely. Very high probability that it wasn't. Satoshi released the code, very active on the message boards and GitHub and things of that nature. The very people who should have gotten it, the cypherpunks that he mailed it out to on the mailing list, they didn't get it. They didn't do much with it for 18 months. The very people who should have gotten it, these extremely ideological applied financial cryptography specialists who'd been trying to create this for decades. So this, I think that, Bitcoin, like Satoshi, he just tinkered with it, probably wasn't a professional programmer, tinkered around, released it, because he did put together very strong cryptographic primitives and protocols in a very clever way. It's the clever way that he put them together, but it's, he wasn't necessarily a professional. You can look at his code and see that. And so, I don't really think it was CIA or NSA. I think that disputes all the evidence that's available out there. But could one of these intelligence services kind of pick it up and use it? Yeah, they could. Because just like iron or steel or gunpowder, cryptography is just a new type of tool, and it's neutral. And so it can be wielded by whomever and for whatever purpose somebody wants to wield it for. And cryptography has changed the tides of the world. Go see The Imitation Game. Alan Turing, he was asked, who decides who lives and who dies? Because he's the one who broke Enigma, right? He's like, I do, because I can do things other people can't. And it's estimated that over 14 million Allied soldiers' lives were saved, basically, because Alan Turing and his work in cracking Enigma, and then not letting the Nazis know that he had cracked Enigma. So, cryptography is a very, very powerful tool, but it can be wielded by whomever and for whatever purpose.
Yeah, there's so many technologies and other new inventions where you can make that argument for, whether it's guns or hacking with cybersecurity, because, we're seeing governments use it against other governments with cybersecurity now, with cyber warfare, and how prevalent it is. We're seeing identity theft with the private sector and hackers doing it. So, I mean, these are just technologies that, like you said, I don't think they're necessarily good or bad, but, in the wrong people's hands with the wrong motivation from the wrong people, they can be looked at in society as bad.
Yeah, and, to kind of hit on this point, Amir Taki, who's, one of the early in Bitcoin, very, very anarchist libertarian, he's like, we should get WikiLeaks to accept Bitcoin. And Satoshi's like, he's like, first, you can't solve political problems with cryptography. And second, don't do that, because you're going to bring attention and that is going to scorch this new community. But Amir Taki and people like him and Cody Wilson, they've got just this penchant for their own ego, and they just want to be able to prance around like some poodle mascot, thinking that they're doing something good, when really they're just children playing with toys. And that's the problem we've got now, is that people like Blythe Masters, who major innovator in credit default swaps from JP Morgan, she's now CEO of Digital Asset Holdings, a Bitcoin-focused company. Goldman Sachs just put $50 million into Circle. We had $160 million put into 21 Inc. earlier this year, and we don't even know what they do. And $75 million went into Coinbase this year. I mean, that's like $300 million almost in 3 different Bitcoin startups. And the people behind the Coinbase funding, vice chairman of Morgan Stanley, someone from Thomson Reuters, USAA, BBVA, Docomo. So we've got major players, professionals who are actually able to get things done, coming into and professionalizing Bitcoin. And so these little children playing with their toys, they're getting increasingly marginalized and pushed out, mainly because they just can't get anything done, to be honest. And second, it's also separating the men from the boys. And they're just little boys playing with toys. They don't have any money. It's why they have to go around begging to get their projects crowdfunded and crowdsourced. And meanwhile, you got these startups coming in, and they're raising $50 million from Goldman Sachs, the men being able to come in and actually do things and get things done. And so I think it's important to kind of make that distinction. We're going to see a big change in Bitcoin because the men are going to be taking away the little toy from these little boys that can't get anything done.
Yeah, it's kind of like how the internet, I guess, was originally just used as a message board. I guess there wasn't any commerce done on it initially with the internet, and then websites started going up, and people didn't know how to monetize it initially. But now it looks like people, instead of just anything getting funded, people are starting to come up with actual viable business plans or more disruptive things. And that's a next question that I was going to ask you about is how does Bitcoin increase its network effect? And with the blockchain to become more mainstream and to transition to where, people, more everyday people on Main Street can start to use it.
Well, that's great. And it's not just one network effect. It's actually 7 network effects, and they're all taking place at the same time. Just to, put words to it, you've got speculation, you've got merchant adoption, you've got consumers, you've got the mining/security, you've got developers. Number 6, you've got financialization, and number 7, you've got this world reserve currency or settlement currency status. And all of these network effects are taking place at varying speeds at the same time, and they all strengthen and reinforce each other. And so, the speculation network effect, that has to be built on a foundation of security. And we've got a ton of security built into Bitcoin. We've got the Armory Bitcoin wallet building enterprise-level, industrial-grade wallet applications. We've got speculation having it go from a nickel to over $1,000 in a few years. Everybody loves to chase the rabbit. That brings in new users. We've got merchant adoption with BitPay raising over $30 million and BitNet, former Visa guys, raising $15 million. All of those bringing on major merchants. BitNet's brought on the airline industry as a whole, integrating into their industry's system, and also bringing on Rakuten, the 8th largest internet company in the world. BitPay, on the other hand, their clients include Microsoft, Tiger Direct, Newegg, Overstock, Zynga, a handful of publicly traded companies, and Dell. So, we're just now kind of cresting on this second network effect and moving into the consumer network effect, where consumers will be using Bitcoin solely because merchants take it. And so that's going to be building out services that are remittances and other use cases like that. But that's really kind of where we're at. The merchant adoption, I think, has largely outstripped the new consumers and users, and so that's one of the reasons Circle just raised $50 million, because that consumer network effect infrastructure needs to be built out, and Circle's done a great job doing it because, once again, he's a man, not just a boy playing with his toy. He's building a real legit solution, and he's raised $17 million, he raised $9 million, he raised another $50 million. So, he's raised tens and tens of millions of dollars, and he's actually getting something done. Instead of just like sitting over in the corner or on his soapbox, like talking about things that should get done. Ideas are dime a dozen. It's all about execution. It's all about getting things done, providing solutions that people are willing to pay for. And that's building out these network effects. And it's going at a really fast pace. And we've even got network effects, that 6th network effect of financialization. We've actually got companies building that out. Terra Exchange, they're CFTC regulated and compliant now. Ledger X wants to do physically settled Bitcoin derivatives swap exchange facility. We've got SolidX that's providing similar types of things. Then we've got Digital Asset Holdings, where Blythe Masters is the CEO. She's going to be building out that type of financialization for Wall Street. So yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is it's been in commotion and consolidating, but it's in forward motion like never before, and it's actual real men and women who can make execution happen, and not just sit around and whine about the state of their personal circumstances and not do anything about it.
There seems to be thousands of programmers who have donated, hundreds, if not thousands, of hours into improving the source code. Because I read the book called Age of age of cryptocurrencies. And, it was written by Wall Street Journal writers and reporters who are very good writers, but, they're not libertarian. They don't know the Austrian School of Economics, and their view of money is very convoluted. Let's just say it's a strictly Keynesian viewpoint. But it just seems that, people tend to only look at the bad things that can happen with Bitcoin. They bring up I think the 51% hashing power thing where someone can gain a monopoly over that. But yet look at all the money that's been invested into all these different potentially disruptive industries in the blockchain technology. I think we're going to see some major innovations come down the pipe in the next 5 or 10 years. Just because we haven't seen it in the last year or two doesn't mean we're not going to see it in the next 7 to 10 years. There's not going to be many industries disrupted.
Oh, this technology is going to change things. Blockchain technology, there is no doubt about it. And I actually agree with 21 Inc.'s CEO, Dr. Balaji Srinivasan, who's a managing partner at Andreessen Horowitz, that it is a foregone conclusion now that Bitcoin, and it will be Bitcoin, is going to be adopted at the institutional level. It's just a matter of time. I agree with him. I think that, we've passed that point of no return. The network effects are deep enough. It will be Bitcoin. How the exact shape of how that's going to take, well, it's going to depend on the men and the women who aren't just playing with toys like little children. It's going to depend on the companies that they build, the things that they get executed and done, and that's going to be the world we live in, the one that people who actually get things done build and create. That's the world that is here. It's the world from the people who actually get things done have created. Regardless of what their ideology is, regardless of whether they're Keynesian or Austrian or whatever, it's the disruptors and the innovators and the executors who build and shape our world and forever change our lives.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a good sign, Trace, that people of so many different backgrounds, whether they're on Silicon Valley, and, maybe they're hardcore Democrats or they're libertarians on Silicon Valley or they're on Wall Street, and they're all, they're trying to objectively look at this technology and say, this is good stuff. This is similar to how the internet was in the mid to late 90s. This has a lot of potential to do some major innovation, drastically lower costs, especially in e-commerce, and, improve regulating transactions and things like that. Because, we're seeing the problems now with the credit card systems and the other online banking problems that we have, where how easily everything is hacked and cybersecurity and stuff. And wouldn't Bitcoin and cryptocurrency help solve a lot of these problems?
Oh, it solves so many of the problems. Like, once you start using it and you're comfortable with it, it makes stuff so much easier. I've been helping work on a couple business deals. We got, one of them got closed a few weeks ago. 6-figure deal, U.S. dollars, all transacted in Bitcoin. We're able to use the multi-signature component to create escrow. It went from, hey, do you think we could do a deal, to having the deal done, executed, signed, sealed, delivered, and the Bitcoins in the buyer's hand after the Bitcoins in the seller's hand after the buyer received everything he wanted, all within 36 hours. Because the speed at which the deal can get done and the trust can be established using this trustless network is just so fast. And the deal I'm working on now, helping somebody get finished and use Bitcoin with, it's a 7-figure deal. So there's actual economic activity and deals and business that are getting done in this industry, and it's making stuff so much easier, and you're not having to spend tons and tons of money on escrow and arbitrators and lawyers and all this stuff. You can just kind of disintermediate all of that out because you can use the Bitcoin network to establish the trust between the two parties.
I'm all for efficiency. So anything long-term that's going to bring more efficiency to the economy, I'm definitely in favor of, although, governments might not be that. We've seen some news stories come out about Mt. Gox and how the coins may have been gone long before they said. Do you think the government needs to step in for regulation, or do you think the free market, the private sector, could have handled this all by itself and, just by just saying, this guy needs to go to the CEO of Mt. Gox should be in prison. In the free market, businesses go bankrupt. There is fraud. It happens. And we don't need government to drastically lay massive amounts of rules and regulations all over the place and stop, progress.
Yeah, I don't really think we need all that much regulation. It's going to be really hard to get it done right because, like, this is a new technology. The regulators, they can't code. They don't know how to read code. That is, they let alone be able to articulate in statutory language what it is they're attempting to regulate. I mean, it's very difficult for them to do that. And the regulation that is out there that I think is actually very positive for the industry is the Proceeds of Crime Act in the Isle of Man. And it went into effect April 1st, 2015. It's enshrined in law now. And it regulates mainly based on the use cases. It regulates based on how you use Bitcoin as opposed to trying to regulate the Bitcoin technology itself, which you can't really do because you just don't have the hashing power to do it, the computers. And so I think it's going to be very helpful for the regulation to make the rules of the game clear, because that's how the institutional adoption comes into play. But that's going to benefit particular jurisdictions, and it's going to harm other ones. For example, the United States and New York, particularly, I think they're very harmed because of the regulatory climate here. I know companies that just aren't getting formed, or if they are formed, they're re-domiciling, and the employees are getting hired or moved to a different jurisdiction. The lawyers, the service providers in the U.S., they're not getting paid. It's the ones in the other countries that are getting paid. And, that's harmful for the U.S. economy. It's harmful for the national security. It's harmful in general. We need to have kind of a very good environment if the U.S. wants to have the technology here. They can always go the route of North Korea. North Korea uses typewriters today. I mean, the U.S. can go that route. The U.S. doesn't have to be the technological dominant player. If they really want to make it that hard on the tech industry with things like this key escrow and everything else that's really pissing off Apple and Google and Silicon Valley, they can piss off the tech companies, and the tech companies can go somewhere else. And the Bitcoin tech companies, they are going somewhere else, and they're getting formed somewhere else because of the regulatory environment in the U.S. And I think that's actually very harmful for U.S. national security. As I talked about earlier, it's the cryptography that's really changed the tides in the affairs of men for centuries. All the way since the Caesar cipher thousands of years ago. So the U.S. needs to get their act together, or the men and women who actually execute and who actually get stuff done, they're going to do it somewhere else. Blythe Masters, her business is not in the U.S. Coinbase, that just raised $75 million, they're not in the U.S. They're over in London, because London's got very friendly Bitcoin environment. It's problematic for the U.S. You're just going to run out the entire industry? How's that going to help the U.S.? I really don't know.
I think it's unintended consequences. I mean, the U.S. has been so much better in terms of the global economy and innovation stuff than many other countries for so long that just gotten fat and happy, and then they layer on more regulations, and they think people, because it's the U.S., people will want to stay here. But there's a lot better options now, and especially with the math and science scores and computer programmers, there's so many other programmers that are really good that are not in the U.S. People don't have to stay in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's that. I mean, there's a reason that Starfleet headquarters is in Silicon Valley, right? In Star Trek, because D.C., New York, Boston, L.A., the power, it's already shifted to Silicon Valley. I mean, everybody knows it. Uber, Google, Airbnb, Facebook.
Well, they're creating most of the jobs, right?
they're creating the jobs. They're shaping public opinion. They're the innovators, the disruptors, and the executors, and they are That's where stuff is changing and where things are happening. Everybody else just is kind of eating their table scraps.
Now, Trace, when do you think retail investors will be able to actually invest in some of these blockchain innovation technologies? How soon are some of these, since you're an angel investor in the Bitcoin and blockchain space, how soon do you think some of these companies will be coming to an exchange for investors to start looking at?
In terms of going public, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen anytime soon. Silicon Valley has been very good at keeping the really good performers from going public anytime soon. Look at the size of the IPOs, right? Like Facebook, Alibaba, Uber freaking raised money at $40 billion valuation, and they're still not public. Like, why is Uber not public? And from what I understand, they're deliberately understating their revenues and the market impact that they're having because they don't want to rile the regulators as much. If they were public, they would have to disclose all types of information that might upset regulators or whatever. It's better to kind of do things surreptitiously and quietly. Whether you're Uber or Airbnb or any of these other disruptive companies. So I don't really think that we're going to see publicly traded Bitcoin companies anytime soon, at least legitimate ones. I mean, everybody kind of play on the Bitcoin name, but yeah, if you're actually the real executor and you're really adding the value, why sell to the public and let them get the gain? It's not, just not really why.
Yeah. The mindset in Silicon Valley seems to have changed. That a lot of the IPOs that get dumped are not really that very good, or they're really high valuation, and the people think the stocks could potentially crash. So you're not seeing.
Yeah, and a lot of that's unintended consequences from DC with Dodd-Frank and compliance costs and things along that lines. So yeah, I mean, retail investors they're always the last ones to buy. So that's most of the value's already been harvested. But yeah, it's been made even worse by regulation coming out of Washington.
My last question also has to do with, the way the libertarian mindset is, and we talked about that a little bit earlier in the interview. Do you think gold and Bitcoin complement or compete with each other?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they're very complementary. I came into the space from gold, runtogold.com, but now, gold is a commodity money. It's limited in amount, but it's not extensible. In order to extensify it, we had to use fiat currency. We had to use things like the telegraph, and we had to use third-party. We had to use ledgers and double-entry bookkeeping and innovations like that. So fiat currency is extensible but not limited in amount. Well, now we got this math-based currency that is both limited in amount and extensible, and so we get the best of both. So yeah, it's a tremendous value adder, value provider. It makes things so much more efficient. And I think they're actually very complementary. In fact, I want to work on making some of these cryptographic assets, whether they're warehouse receipts or whatever, so that we can represent the metals in a cryptographic form and be zipping them around the world and taking advantage of jurisdictional arbitrage and things of that nature. And so I've got my Run to Gold blog where I write a lot about what it was, with the commodity currency and the fiat currency, but I also host a new podcast where I interview all the top CEOs in Bitcoin, and I've done over 50 of these interviews. So anybody wants to see the state of the economy in Bitcoin or learn about a particular topic, go to the www.bitcoin.kn and you can listen to the CEOs that are actually building the future, building what money's going to be, not necessarily what it is or what it was.
It seems like the people in power, the economic and political elites, these central planners, it seems they want a cashless society, Trace, where, they're limiting the amount of money that can be deposited, they're limiting the amount of money that can be withdrawn, that has to be reported. They don't want people using cash as much anymore. Do you think Bitcoin offers a safer alternative for protection for people from that, to where, the government's trying to track every single transaction? or the government's trying to eliminate the underground economy and widen its tax base by putting like a value-added tax on almost every single transaction?
Well, I mean, these are political questions, and political questions can't be solved with cryptography. Remember what Satoshi said. But when we're talking about this technology, Bitcoin is part of what makes Bitcoin is that it's got immutable persistence. There is no memory hole with Bitcoin. Once a transaction's in the blockchain, it's there forever. It becomes a fact in terms of information theory. And that's, that has a very, very powerful use case in a lot of ways. It enables triple entry bookkeeping. But, that's not to say that we won't be able to develop blockchain technology in other ways. Perhaps we're able to use homomorphic encryption or indistinguishability obfuscation to apply for completely anonymous currencies, the crypto note protocol or Dash or Shadow Cash. There are definitely projects being worked on that try to accomplish those goals. And ring signatures, coin join with Bitcoin, we can introduce so much plausible deniability into that immutable record that, it's just not possible to track. So, I mean, there's so much possible to be built that it really takes the men and the women to come in and execute and make their view of the future and make what they want real. You can want something, but I mean, my grandma, she was great. She used to say, you can want in one hand and you can spit in the other, and you can see which one fills up faster. You can want a completely anonymous currency that's digital, or you can just go build it. Go build it. Freaking learn how to code, learn some math, learn some cryptography, and make it work. Like, get it done. And, and that's the thing with cryptographers. They wield numbers just like sorcerers or wizards wield magic. And you can learn how to cast pretty much any type of spell now, because Satoshi created a whole new circle of magic with this blockchain technology. And what you can do with that circle of magic, it makes possible casting these spells of completely anonymous currency or immutably persistent history. A couple of days ago when I was presenting at the Inside Bitcoins conference in New York, I said, you can't just shred all the documents anymore, like with Arthur Andersen, if they're hashed and put in the blockchain. So the absence of evidence will become the evidence of absence. If you want a new spell to be able to cast, then go and freaking craft it, and then publish it to the world so that we have it in the spell book, and then we can use it.
Yeah, transparency is good. It creates an honest society, but we just have so many smart people in math and science and computer science working now on Bitcoin. So I think any of the math problems, the hashing problem, some of these other issues, the source code's going to get updated. These problems are eventually going to get solved. And then it's just a question of then how to make it, I guess, efficient and simple to use for regular people who don't understand the math.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we move further and further into the information age, I think that freedom and liberty, and perhaps even life itself, is going to become increasingly a luxury good. And you're going to have the intellectual capacity to acquire the financial resources to purchase that luxury good. And those intellectual capacities are going to be primarily rooted in technological and math-based skills. And then you're also going to need to have the business sense on how to apply those skills in a profitable way. So it's going to take these two types of literacy. But yeah, I mean, we've never had a brighter future if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's just so many interesting technological innovations coming down the pipe, 3D printing and so many others. There's so many robotics, so many other great things that are space travel, maybe in the next 10 or 15, 20 years. The innovations, I think there was just a major breakthrough that NASA announced with an engine. So, we're seeing all these things, a confluence of things, and it's because of math and science and and people being able to collaborate with each other online. In the past they wouldn't have been able to maybe even see each other for weeks or months. It would have taken so long. Now people can video conference or chat online very quick and share ideas and stuff like that. So the internet has really, I guess, accelerated innovation.
Yeah, and we've got a tool like GitHub now. I mean, I don't know how many people use GitHub, but there's a TED Talk by Clay Shirky on how GitHub will transform governments. And, with GitHub, everybody has access to all of the source code all the time. And you're able to resolve discussion and disagreement and merge into consensus software code in a much more efficient way and manner, and in a way that's large and distributed, and it's transparent, and it's open source. And what it enables is it enables people to engage in cooperation without coordination. And that's a huge, huge deal. It's a whole new way of arguing that's better than even the scientific journal. And it took humanity, 160 years to come up with the scientific journal after the Gutenberg press. It only took 10 years to come up with the romance novel. So, we see where humanity's priorities are at.
Yeah, and these open source computer programmers can work on the code, right, for Bitcoin and the blockchain all at different times. So you have, they can save their work, people can check it, people can say, oh, that's a good idea, oh, that's a bad idea. People can debate and discuss at different times. So it's just pretty amazing with open source what's being able to be accomplished right now. I think we live in very interesting times.
Yeah, and it makes for a much more secure world. With the X9 financial services standards and everything that are be coming down the pipeline, we're going to be able to create these cryptographic assets that shut the door on hackers when it comes to identity theft and things like that. And Bitcoin's going to make a lot of this possible. So these hundreds of millions of names and addresses and personal information getting hacked from Sony and Home Depot. And, Sony, that was North Korea, and it was like politically staged hack attack. We have to make things much more secure. We can't be putting in these back doors like key escrow that the feds have been talking about lately. That just makes for a very insecure system. And, we're going to be like the long march is definitely happening. Humanity's going from the swamps to the stars, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The blockchain technology, the more I learn about it, the more it interests me. I've read a couple of Bitcoin books in the last 6 months. I read Dominic Frisby's book on Bitcoin, The Future of Money, and then I read The Age of Cryptocurrencies, and I do keep track of it, but it's very interesting stuff with that and all the other technologies. I just want to thank you again, Trace, for your time. Please tell our listeners more where they can find your work.
Yeah, probably, Bitcoin-related stuff. I'd recommend going to either weusecoins.com. That's where we send a lot of new people that want to come into Bitcoin. And then if you want to, learn about what's going on in the actual industry, like hear it from the horse's mouth, I interview top CEOs from across the Bitcoin space, and I do that at the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, which is at bitcoin.kn. So that's where your listeners can really kind of learn more about the space and what's actionable for them.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you again for your time, and we'll definitely have you on again to talk about Bitcoin and the blockchain technology market in the future as more and more current events come out.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jason.